Welcome to By the Books, the podcast helping business owners navigate the complex world of business, tax, and bookkeeping. Now, to the owner and president of Cycline, Lindsay Klein.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. This is Lindsay Klein with Cycline, honest, accurate bookkeeping performed on time, and your host of By the Books. I'm here today with Jon Poteet, who is the managing director of Cyberware AI, which is a company that does military-grade, let's see if I can get this right, military-grade enterprise-level security for small businesses, but really businesses of all sizes.
Correct.
You're just trying to make it affordable for small business.
Correct. Yeah, the big barrier to entry for small businesses is the price point for securing their futures, really. We are a government contractor, licensed, registered, vetted, currently working on a few projects. What we're trying to do is leverage that mil-spec security capability for small businesses. Due to our, kind of unique engagement model, we're able to provide that level of security at a price point that would normally be
way higher than they could afford.
It would be out of their budget, yes. And
so for the average small business owner, which is probably largely the demographic that's listening to my podcast, people that are doing a trade, or maybe it's a side hustle, small businesses, the average person that has a salon or a marketing company, why would they care? I mean, they may be telling themselves, I'm not really holding a lot of data, why do I need to pay for a service like this? What would you tell them?
Well, let's back up. I'm not necessarily saying you need to pay for a service like this. What I'm saying is that everybody needs to, be educated and trained in the basics of cybersecurity and how to protect your personal data and your clients' data. And you need to be aware of where you're at, as a small business owner. How your company runs is, you have the optics on that, but you don't really have the optics on what's going on behind the scenes with your network. And you may think you do, but you really need cybersecurity to come in and do a thorough vulnerability assessment to be able to assess where you're at and then give you a remediation report on the things you need to fix before we leave the room for free, just some tips. And then maybe things we need to fix within the next month, and then things you can kick down the road, maybe about 6 months.
But why should anybody care?
Well, the average cyber event for a small business costs them $2.9 million.
$2.9 million, which for the average small business, that means the business ceases to exist.
It is. 60% of the businesses that have experienced a cyber breach are out of business and file bankruptcy within 6 months.
Why is that? What happens in a cyber breach that causes this catastrophic event?
Sure. So primarily it's disruption of business. They'll completely freeze your assets.
Now, when you say they, you're talking hackers?
The hackers, correct.
Okay, so hackers do something to breach your data.
Correct, and hold it ransom, yeah.
So no longer is it, like I remember when that movie Ransom came out, where the guy's son got kidnapped, and, he was wealthy, and they're holding the kid for ransom, right? And they wanted like $1 million or something, right? It's no longer capture the person, it's capture the data, right?
Sure. Absolutely. And that can be done in a myriad of ways. We could take you down that, but let's just stay pretty high level. And you would say, why me? I'm a small business. They're not targeting you in particular. What's happening is they're sending out bots, and they are finding your vulnerabilities. And once they latch onto you, then they will start sending signals back to whoever's, orchestrating the bot's activities. And then they'll look into you. That's when people get involved. But it's not, you don't have somebody sitting in a dark basement somewhere looking up your business and I'm going to get her. Now, let's back up. 88% of cyber events for small business are financially motivated, whereas large organizations, they're not always financially motivated. Sometimes they want data, such as if you want to hack the Air Force. You're not really after money at that point. If you're, foreign bad actor.
Right.
They don't want your money.
Right.
So a lot of the bigger organizations, Sony, that was intellectual property, that hack that happened about, 6 years ago, releasing movies early and stuff like that. It did affect them financially, but they weren't necessarily held for ransom.
Gotcha.
It was that.
That was more of a pirating deal.
It was, exactly, yeah.
Okay. So by and large, though, for different ways they do it, but by and large, it's financial gain.
It is.
In some cases, if it's military and things like that, it could be for security.
Right. And
trying to do something unscrupulous to the country. Yeah.
Exactly. And you know what? They're actually doing that. They're going... It's the same end game. It's the disruption and destruction of the U.S. country, economy, government, all of it. Because there are over 35 million small businesses. Small business runs the U.S. economy. It's not Fortune 100 companies. So why protect them? Because that's what runs our whole economy. And if that's at stake, if that's jeopardized, then they're getting their way.
Now, for the average person out there that says, "Well, I have McAfee," or I forget the other ones out there, right? The
Norton antivirus.
Norton, yeah. I have that, so I'm covered. What would you say to that?
I would say that's a good start. Absolutely. And something we mentioned anecdotally is that your computer asks you to do a lot of things that are inconvenient, and we bypass them. We say, okay, that security certificate's outdated. I'm still going to go to that website because it's convenient. And those are exactly the kind of things, those vulnerabilities at those endpoints is where the hackers can get in. So, yes, keeping your antivirus updated. Software. So software patches on your mobile devices and on your computer, those are huge because those patches that are coming in, it's not always to fix functionality. It's mainly to fix security issues that were brought up. We're chasing the hackers. So they will devise new techniques, new tactics, and then we have to play catch up. We're not the criminally minded. Now, there are some good white hat hackers that used to be bad guys that are on our side. And fortunately, we're friends with those too. And they do think in that mindset. But for the most part, the cybersecurity community, most of us come from a security or governmental background or that type of mindset. And, I don't think of creative ways. And so what we have to do is once a new type of, vulnerability gets, lights are put on it, that's whenever we play catch up.
Well, I remember you telling me the story, and I can't remember what company it was, but I remember you telling me that the way the hackers got in was through the thermostat.
Correct. So, yeah,
So it's...
I think we can say it. I think everybody knows that it's Target.
Okay, and Target.
The hackers, the thermostat in their corporate headquarters was on Wi-Fi, was on the network. And the hackers got in through the thermostat and navigated their way through the financial systems and essentially locked Target's financial system down and got access to all my data because I have a Target account and, millions of others as well.
So it's not always the way you think, right. Even if you've got your laptop locked down, they're getting really creative.
Absolutely.
They can find, and we have so many smart devices.
That's a big factor.
I bet people are not thinking about thermostats and, probably even sprinkler systems and all the things that we have connected to our Wi-Fi.
Yeah, there was a casino in Vegas that was hacked. They got in through the fish feeder system.
Oh, wow.
Through the aquarium, the fish feeder was set up on their network so that they could, and you can imagine some of those big saltwater, aquariums at some of the casinos.
Right.
They're huge enterprises, so everything's controlled through computer, and that's how they got in. And you would think that's about as strong a security as you could find as a casino. So
right. Wow. Well, and Target, I'm sure Target has lots of security as well. So they're getting really creative.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, that goes back to bots and AI. And let me jump off into that just a little bit.
Okay.
So the evolution of hacking is starting to snowball in the artificial intelligence, machine learning, predictive analytics, all of that is starting to take over. Hacking itself has been democratized. I'm not a nefarious hacker, but if I wanted to, I could go out to the dark web with some cryptocurrency and give an IP address and essentially pay $500 to hack someone.
Wow.
So it's very democratized. You no longer have to be. It's a business. You know, some of the ransomware events that we're involved in, you end up communicating directly with the hackers, and they communicate just like someone in corporate. It's very professional. It's a business.
You had this happen recently. You were telling me about an instance where you were actually part of the negotiations, right? This was your client where their data was being held ransom?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And it was originally that the ransom was for $10 million. And
talk about how that original email, when that came in, how was it worded?
Sure.
Did anyone take it seriously?
No. That's the thing. So it came in. It looked somewhat like a blast to a .edu or a .gov entity. It came through to everybody with that email suffix.
Interesting.
And it essentially said, howdy. You have 5 days to pay us $10 million or we're completely going to erase everything. And this was a school system. This wasn't a business.
So this was an independent school district.
Correct. So,
and they're asking a school district to pay $10 million to get their data back.
Right.
And so what was the reaction when they get this email?
Well, again, we didn't hear about it until it was about day 2. And they realized that they did not have access to essentially 1,500 desktops and then some more personal critical data that wasn't on the desktop that was, with the headquarters, with the servers. So how that went down, they reached out to us, contacted. Now, were they
a client prior to that? No. So they're in this dire situation trying to find help.
So fortunately for Dallas, we have access to a professor of cybersecurity in DFW that I've worked with at a couple of different companies. He's pretty much at the top of the game. And due to his relationship within academia, people just knew him. And so they reached out to him. And that's how everything started to unfurl. And ended up securing 1,500 desktops, rebuilding all of those. Meanwhile, doing a proof of life to ensure that they had the data that they said that they had, similar to if you take someone ransom and you have them hold up a newspaper with the date on it. The same thing is, do you really have the data you say you do? And so hacked the hackers.
How funny.
And then started communicating with them and saying, okay, we have all this data, but we can't get to this data.
So you were able to get some of it back.
Most of it.
You were able to get most of it back.
And so the ransom that was actually paid was $600,000 versus $10 million.
Because there was a piece that you couldn't get back.
Yeah, it's just one of those things.
And it just ended up getting paid by a school district.
Correct.
Was this publicized?
To a certain degree, it was. People knew that the school system was compromised. Fortunately, it happened.
So people knew it got hacked, or did they?
I believe so. Administration, I don't know if every parent did, but I have seen in the months following that they are, essentially coming clean and saying, yes, we had a cyber breach and this and that.
Okay.
And that goes back to the statistic that 85% of the cyber breaches are never reported to the FBI. Because
how much?
85%.
85% of breaches.
That's straight from the FBI this morning. I had to double check that just to make sure.
Are never reported to the FBI. Are they reported to anyone?
No. FBI is
That's who would handle that.
Mm-hmm.
So 85% of breaches are just kept under the radar, essentially.
Well, they're paid. Of the ransomwares, a good chunk of them for small business are
They pay the ransom.
Pay
they get their
$2,000, and let's just keep business going. I don't, he shut me down for 4 hours and it impacted the, business this much. Here's $1,000. Just get us back up and running. And the thing is, with these hackers, you're like, well, if I pay them, who's to say that they're going to turn them back on? True, but again, we're talking about these guys are basically business. It's an exchange. You pay them to receive access back to your data.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So when you've
it's a huge economy in the U.S. alone.
That is crazy.
2021 was $3.5 billion economy.
Wow.
So the business is booming for hackers.
Wow.
Now worldwide is terrifying. So we're on course to hit over $6 trillion in cyber damages worldwide.
Wow. So that is unbelievable.
It is, okay, what's the best way to say this? Next to China and the United States, cybersecurity is the next highest GDP.
Wow.
It's over any other country.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I would assume getting worse the more hackers are coming on board. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's snowballing, especially because it's democratized. It's you and I could go out and become hackers today with the right channels, for sure.
So what, for the person listening to this that has the average small business, it's scary, scary stuff. What do they do?
The first thing you need to do is, there's a couple things. There's a lot of things you can do right now, as we could do within the next 30 minutes that would secure your business. And I'll cover those just real quickly. There are things that are annoying to you. Two-factor authentication. Everybody knows that that's what you need, but really that's what you need. That's pretty bulletproof. The other is keep your software updated. We discussed that, not just the antivirus, but all software. Change all passwords, because if you're like most people, there's some similarity to all your passwords. And while one can say, well, they can't figure that out. Well, it's not they figuring it out. It's artificial intelligence working at quantum speeds that is doing it. It's not such as a brute force attack. That's where they just bam, 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 bam until they break into your access. It's a pretty common way to break in through passwords. So yeah, you would change your password and then connect them to a password manager like Google Password, and they're free. And just have that manage your passwords. Another thing is have a separate password. This gets really annoying, I'm sorry, for your mobile devices, because those are particularly vulnerable because they're not behind your network firewall.
Interesting.
They're living out in the world. So it's good to have that. And again, you'd put that on
when you say password, do you mean the password you put in to log into your phone initially when you open up your phone?
Correct. Yeah, not your birthday, not your PIN you use for your check card.
Okay.
Yeah, just a completely new password that has nothing related with anything. Yeah.
Now, what about the pattern? Because that's what I use, the pattern, instead of a number.
Oh, I mean, that doesn't matter. So long as it's not your birthday or your social or...
Okay. Just nothing that could be tied to you, per se.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, just random generated numbers. That's really the best way. Another one that I was guilty of in the past, and I got my identity stolen as a result, and that is using a public Wi-Fi.
Yeah, you got on to me about that.
Yeah, so whenever I have
my computer up right now. When John got here, it was like, you shouldn't be on the public Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
I already got an F from John today.
And the thing, I did it too, just to see what it would do. And sure enough, it popped up error messages that I showed you, like, this is unsafe and this is unsafe. And a lot of people would just be like, cancel and continue.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's because here's the thing. When I was hacked we were in Silicon Valley. I was in the San Jose, and I was at a nice hotel. And about midnight, I get a phone call from my bank, and they're like, did you purchase this? And no. But I did purchase Grubhub about 4 hours earlier using their Wi-Fi. So that meant that probably some unemployed Silicon Valley coder guy was hanging out in the lobby of that hotel and just monitoring and waiting for someone. Yeah. Which there's probably better places if you're going to do Wi-Fi than Silicon Valley, safer places, but that just proves the point.
Interesting.
That was a case of, as soon as it happened, they had all my information.
Wow. Now, is it better or worse or the same to instead log on to your hotspot of your phone?
Absolutely. Always hotspot.
Hotspot is okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's
so I'll
preferred.
just do that then.
So, or you can VPN. There's a lot of affordable VPNs. So if you can get on the Wi-Fi and then say at Starbucks and then you VPN to
I'm going to nod and smile like I know what that is. Sure, John, VPN. What does that mean for those of us that don't speak tech?
It's a virtual protection network, and it is what you would log in. Okay, let's think about 20 years ago. If you worked in corporate, if you needed access to your files, you would be at work, and you have access to the C drive or the D drive.
Right.
The VPN is what you do from home to get access through the firewall. And we essentially have that today in one form.
So if you have the VPN, you can use public Wi-Fi. Mm-hmm. Because the VPN is what's protecting
exactly.
you.
Yeah, it's your protection.
Gotcha.
Right. Do not use public Wi-Fi without a VPN. And then, a big section of ransomware is due to phishing. In phishing, there's no software for phishing. That is you. That's your training, your education, your exposure.
And that would be, for example, getting an email that looks legitimate because they use legitimate companies' email templates that look like it's your bank or look like it's from Amazon, and you click on the link, right? That's what you're talking about?
Absolutely. So we have a software, artificial intelligence software product, beta testing it. It has a test name of Auditware, which I don't like because that is a scary name. And everybody's like, I'm in trouble. It's Auditware. But so I'm going to make them change that. But for right now, that's what we call it. And we have about 2,500 different templates. They're real world templates. What you do with Auditware is you'd put it in, it's a plug-in into your browser, and then you fill out some information. This is my age. This is what I'm into, whatever, my education level. And then it just sits back and watches your behavior for a while. And then it starts trying to trick you.
Interesting. So it's like a training tool.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's a cyber hygiene, like behavior tool.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so what it does, and then you can run the report at any time and see what is my grade. How am I doing? Where could I shore up? One of the things that was I'm kind of giving myself away here, but I might have spent too much time on Reddit because it gave me a poor grade. Reddit is kind of a promiscuous website when it comes to endpoints and how many things.
So is that where the hackers hang out? Is Reddit?
Oh, they're everywhere. Sure, Reddit and Facebook, and so are the bots just scraping every type of information you can put out there. Sure. And again, the people aren't collating this. This is all machine learning that's crunching the numbers.
Yeah.
It's way too granular for us to sit around doing. But it also, due to that automated, it happens, so quickly. It's mind blowing. And you know what I'm telling you today is probably going to be outdated, by tomorrow. In some way, it just moves so quickly. Yeah.
Well, and it's remarkable to me because you were talking earlier about how 85% of these don't even get reported. They just pay a ransom and move on with life, which means the hackers are still out there.
Oh, yeah.
Still continuing to hack other people looking for this stuff.
Yeah, it's all volume. It's a shotgun approach, and some people buy it, and that's how they make their money.
I recently had my bank account breached, which is so annoying because, of course, I had to end up closing that account and getting everything transferred over to a new account. Such a pain in the butt. But this person, however they got my bank information, which, anyone that has access to a check you've written can see your bank information.
Your routing number.
So it's not that difficult. But the thing is I don't write checks. So it must have somehow been a cyber, because I do buy things ACH by putting my account number when I purchase something or, automatic ACH payments.
Debits.
So somehow it had to have been some type of cyber breach because I don't write checks.
And it probably wasn't on your end. If I was a betting man, I would say.
And I'm wondering.
It was probably, the vendor that you'd put it in, and they probably had a cyber breach. And
so something like this, where I know this guy, Sean Scott, I think was the name. He was writing himself checks with had my business name. So somehow he had my business name, had my routing number and account number on the bottom of the check, right? It looked like a legitimate business check. Mm-hmm. But it had his name and, of course, some weird signature that was not mine, which is how I think the bank initially caught it.
Well, that's good that they caught that.
Yeah. I have Chase Bank. So they did catch it and they put a stop on it and alerted me. Thank goodness. So I wasn't out any funds, thankfully. But it was like, okay, how did this happen? How did this guy get all of this information when I don't write checks? If I was a check writer, I could see where if I'm at Office Depot writing a check, the cashier behind the counter has all of that, right? Because he can see the whole check.
What I was kind of getting to is with the phishing thing and vishing, which is voice, where they do it over the phone. That one's really interesting too, seeing someone actually do that and within 30 seconds have access to your Sprint account. Because they know your maiden name, because they acted like they were from your high school, and just all of this. It's very, it's formulaic, but it is very creative. But what I was getting to on the phishing and vishing and all that, training and education, they have really short, entertaining videos. Spend 5 minutes on YouTube and look up, phishing, how to thwart phishing attacks, and it'll show you what to look for. It's it says it comes from Amazon gift card or something, but whenever that's what it says. But when you start clicking into the email, it's like GH ampersand.
It's a weird email address.
Yeah, those type of things that you pick up on that less savvy people might not.
Yeah. You're right.
I think it's generational too. I think that, I'm in my 40s. I think it's hit or miss with us. I think older people, they're not used to looking at that. And I think, my children, my son who's 15, he's whatever. Yeah. I'm not going to give you that. They're very savvy.
Right.
So it's just it's a learning curve. And again, back to being able to thwart these attacks, so much of it has nothing to do with software or networks or cybersecurity or any of that. It's just training and education.
And just the act of clicking on the link is where it becomes a problem, right? It's not like you have to fill out information. Just clicking the link is the issue.
Exactly. Yes.
So be careful about clicking anything on an email.
There's sophisticated emails now. This is really unnerving, and I need to dig a little deeper to see if somebody's coming up with the solution for this. There are emails now you don't have to open.
Interesting.
How that works? Again, I need to find out who.
So just them sending it can be an issue.
Well, sitting your cursor on it, and if you have a read preview, like on an Outlook, if you have that opens it. And you don't know it. You didn't click on it, but because your cursor was on it, it highlighted it. It read it. The computer read it. You didn't.
Interesting.
Yeah. And there it is.
Wow.
So
even the act of reading some of these emails are a problem.
Which gets back to software, endpoint encryption. That's where we come in. There's some stuff you have to have. Okay, so historically there's been a common notion that smaller businesses are at greater risk for cyber events because they lack the resources, the funds, personnel, equipment, training to effectively combat this. That's no longer the case. What we're seeing now is the tools are there. What isn't there is the response time. They don't have that 24/7 by 365 monitoring. Or if they do, a software is doing it. It's not a person that's also monitoring it as well. Whereas with a cybersecurity company, a managed services security provider like us, we have a security operations center, kind of looks like a mini mission control. And there's, obviously environments operating there, but there's also the security and DevOps engineers that are in the SOC that are interpreting this data. And, back to artificial intelligence and machine learning in hacking, that's also the future of combating these, because they are happening on such a quick scale. We don't have that processing power in our brain to spot these statistical anomalies and things that the monitoring systems can do. And that's the biggest discrepancy. They differ in their detection capabilities, the big organizations versus small. And that, again, goes back to the price point and the barrier to security that small businesses have. I would say in continental U.S., to do a vulnerability assessment, it runs a small business about $3,000 to $5,000. That's okay if your small business is financial and your small business is $20 million per year. You can afford that. But your traditional small business that has 2 to 5 people,
right? That's
a lot of money.
That is a lot of money.
So just to have an assessment, just to have visibility. So what we've done is, due to being a government security contractor, having a lot of resources, we are leveraging that and then essentially passing the cost savings to the small business.
That's awesome.
Now, why? Well, do you really want to get into that? I mean, I worked for public corporate companies for 20 years, and, maybe I want to help the small business now. They're taken care of. They're okay. But the small business isn't. All my family and friends, my dad's company, they're not taken care of.
Right.
They're not secured.
Right.
So, and what is that? Again, the barrier to entry is just, once you have a vulnerability assessment, you have essentially a dashboard or a roadmap or speedometer, whatever metaphor you want to use, but you have to know where you're at. And that's, if someone has to pay $3,000 to see where they're at, they're probably not going to.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we have a few different engagement models. There's the growth engagement model, the scale engagement model. Depending upon what your level of organization is, if it's a smaller, SMB, we can come in and do a vulnerability assessment for about $1,000. That seems to be a price point in which the small business owner is okay with saying, here's the stats that we're extremely vulnerable according to statistics. Let's see how much. We're going to find something. Now, how detrimental it is, it depends on what you're doing. But we're definitely going to find something that's going to make you kind of sit back and maybe have a gasp of air and say, God, I didn't know.
So are you looking as granular as something like the thermostat?
We do it all. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Now, we'll do penetration testing, physical penetration testing, where guys like me, they're former special operations military guys, try and sneak into your business, work their way to a terminal, and upload like a fake virus with USB. So if I can get to a terminal, stick that in, your whole organization's compromised.
Wow.
So we'll do that type of stuff. A lot of social engineering goes into that, waiting for someone at a restaurant and picking up their badge or something. So there's a lot that goes into a vulnerability assessment. But the good news is that we've made that no longer a barrier to the small business.
Yeah, that's great.
And I guess kind of a follow-on to that a lot of cybersecurity companies, historically, they want you to use the product that they are competent and comfortable with. We are technology agnostic, meaning if you already have an existing type of monitoring software, Secure Onyx or Splunk or something like that, we'll work with that. Because while we are a startup, we're a startup with substance, because our parent company is a very large IT staffing and software firm. And we can go back to them and say, hey, there's this older detection software they're using. Let's find somebody who can work in that environment so that you don't have to pay for, some of these are like $20,000 for 1 year.
Wow.
That's another barrier to security for the small business.
Right.
So if you can use what you have existing.
And without having to buy another product. Exactly. Yeah, that makes sense.
There's a case of a financial office. A gentleman had a very lucrative financial firm. There was one employee. It was his wife. And so it was him and his wife. And his son had just graduated from MIT. He was like, Dad, you have got to secure your assets. So he had him buy a extremely expensive cybersecurity software, a detection service. The problem is with that, and that's great, that he bought that. It was a little overkill for what he needed. It's great that he bought that. There's no one running it. So as soon as you upload it, it's on its own. Now, you'll get alerts, sure, but
it has to be maintained.
It really does. It needs to be updated, patches, all that kind of stuff. And then you don't have anyone also assessing what are the remediation steps, what's happening right now. It's not so autopilot.
Gotcha.
To just say, oh, I'm going to buy this and go on. So what ended up happening, he had this sunk cost in this extremely expensive enterprise software, $20,000 annual. But he's going to change the next year. But for this year, he was like, it's a sunk cost. I have to use this. So we worked with it. We're like, okay. And so we went and found, a security DevOps engineer that can work on it. And, I think we made him pretty happy. So he didn't have to just eat that. That's a pretty big chunk.
Yeah, that would be a lot to just push to the side and not use it. So that's good you guys do that.
Yeah.
So if there's a small business owner listening, or anyone listening, that would like to get more help with this and to understand their vulnerabilities and what you could do for them, how can they get a hold of you? The
easiest way would be to go to cyberware.ai. .ai is the suffix, so it's cyberware.ai, and just hit the contact us form. It'll go to the same thing as if you email info@cyberware.ai.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I mean, you are very educational. I've learned a lot from you, and I really appreciate your insight.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure there's a lot of people that will get a lot out of this.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And I'm Lindsay Klein with Klein, honest, accurate bookkeeping performed on time, and your host of Buy the Books. Until next time, thanks for joining us, everyone.
Buy the Books is presented by Klein, honest, accurate bookkeeping performed on time. For more information on Klein services or to get a hold of Lindsay, visit Klein.com or email info@Klein.com.
The information provided on this website and podcast does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and materials available are for general information purposes only. Information provided by Klein may not constitute the most up-to-date legal or other information. Listeners should contact their attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular legal matter and should refrain from acting on the basis of this information without first seeking legal advice from counsel in the relevant jurisdiction. Only your individual attorney can provide assurances that the information contained herein and your interpretation of it is applicable or appropriate to your particular situation.